This is the DTV Digest, the podcast that brings you news and reviews of films which didn't make it to the cinema. And now, here's your host, Mike Parkin.
Hello everyone and welcome to the DTV Digest, the podcast which brings you reviews of films which didn't make it to the cinema and instead went straight to DVD, Blu-ray or streaming media. I'm your host Mike Parkin, and joining me this week are Richard Hawes, Stephen Lockridge and Will Bentley. And we'll be covering the following films, starting with The East from the Netherlands. Then we have The Inheritance, Dementer, The Last Exorcist with Danny Trejo. Our short shot this week is a film called Deadlock, and we're going to round up with Eliza Dushku in Open Graves. So, without further ado, let's crack on. Our first review then is The East. A young Dutch soldier called Johannes, deployed to suppress post-World War II independence efforts in the Netherlands colony of Indonesia, finds himself torn between duty and conscience when he joins an increasingly ruthless commander's elite squad. This is it's one of those sort of very sort of prestigious films, I think. It's definitely the sort of the top end of the DTV spectrum in terms of sort of production values and things like that. It is still that sort of case where a lot of foreign films just don't get purchased in the cinema over here. But really, this is the Netherlands equivalent of Platoon, right?
Yeah, easily.
I mean, it's even down to the enigmatic but evil sort of commanding officer kind of scenario. It's it is. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this, I must admit. Well, I say enjoyed. I enjoyed is kind of the right word, in that it's a film that I enjoyed watching. Not so much experiencing, I think, because it does touch on a lot of sort of dark themes, especially the thing that happens at the village towards the end of the film. Is I was really not looking forward to that moment because it was building towards it. But yeah, this is a very well made film from the Netherlands, in which we have this young soldier Johannes. It's set in 1946 roughly, and we go through his time in the army. From being this sort of naive sort of rookie through to this sort of seasoned killer, and then it also carries on. We get interspersed. We get visions of the future, sort of thing. Sort of when he actually returns home back to Amsterdam. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it. I mean, yeah, you touched on it when you said that. It was like the Netherlands kind of Platoon. I mean, I think it was, there's definitely parallels to be drawn with that. I thought it was a really good, really well made film. I thought that, it kind of, you don't sort of necessarily need to know all about Netherlands sort of post-war, post-colonial
ambitions,
activities in to kind of to pick it up quite quickly, because it's really well drawn. At the start, all these kind of idealistic young Dutch men, literally from their arrival, and sort of being kind of spoon-fed the point of their mission, kind of fills you in on what what's going on and sort of what it was about.
But the parallels with Vietnam are just so stark that I was watching it and I'm thinking. I mean, I can imagine, this was a period of sort of Netherlands history that they kind of sort of shoved under the carpet, kind of thing, And I did a tiny bit of reading earlier, which sort of suggested that, as the beginning of the film shows, there was this sort of public outcry about what was going on over there, and it got to the point where it got to the point that even the USA was sort of going, "Oh, that's a bit much, guys. Rein it back in a bit." Which is kind of pot calling the kettle black, where in reverse kind of thing. It's like, well, clearly you didn't learn anything, or you just sort
Yeah.
of thought you could, you could do better, obviously, but there you go.
But I think it was. I mean, the idea was America didn't have colonies and didn't understand. I mean, there's that whole thing that they kind of frowned on old colonial powers, because that was sort of opposite to what America was all about, wasn't it? Was sort of, they were very different, and they weren't, like the Americans sort of ventures into Southeast Asia were like we're sort of done for a different reason, so at this point it was very much like, well, we've all just been through this mess because of people's colonial ambitions, because of the Nazis and so on, and it's not really the way that we should be doing things, and we're all about liberating places. And it's sort of, they could look at what the Dutch were doing as trying to kind of keep hold of this anachronistic thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, isn't it? It kind of feels like, the Netherlands kind of went, well, that's World War II over with. Let's carry on with what we were doing beforehand.
Yeah, and it was. You could see, you could sort of see that there were, Johannes is. They're watching the propaganda films, kind of being taught, well, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're here, and these are the bad guys, and it's like, and then gradually kind of getting that, well, hang on, they've just basically been oppressed by the Japanese occupation, and what are we really helping them? Like, because it sort of gradually started to feel a bit like less and less like they were helping, until, like you say, there was that that really quite horrific scene in the village later on, when it became a bit impossible for him to ignore his doubts, sort of thing. And it was absolutely, like you say, there were so many parallels with sort of Vietnam War movies, as he sort of gradually, like, his idealism gets more and more tarnished, until he's like, hang on, what exactly am I doing here again?
Because he does have, I mean, he does have his heart in his right place, kind of thing. He wants to kind of make a difference, but it's like he gets frustrated with his commanding officer, doesn't he? Because his commanding officer just wants to keep the status quo. He's more worried about the fact that he lost a machine gun during one incident, rather than sort of trying to save the life of a sort of fallen comrade. That he gets more upset about that than sort of trying to help the locals. So and then there's this other guy, the Turk, this sort of like literally a loose cannon who gets shit done, and he can see why he kind of looks up to him, and why sort of, at least initially, is sort of indoctrinated by his way of thinking.
And that was definitely, what was his name, Elias from.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Tom Berenger in it. Yeah.
He really was, sort of, but he was kind of drawn to him at first, because he was like, oh yeah, he's the badass
kind of, sort of thing.
Yeah, badass, and then sort of gradually he's like,
yeah, he's also a deranged lunatic.
Yeah, and it was really odd, that the contrast with what he was doing, like sort of there, and then in the bits in the modern world where he's just like, he's able to sort of completely throw it off and have this different life, and it's like, that was quite surprising.
It is, yeah. I mean, and I was a bit worried about those scenes to begin with. I thought it was actually going to drag the film down, sort of seeing him, sort of post sort of the conflict, when he goes back, and the protesters. We do learn stuff about his dad at certain points.
That was very interesting.
It is, and it's obviously, it must have been a really touchy subject for anyone in that period to even be suspected of collaboration with the Nazis.
This was it, and it is, the fact is, and it's right at the beginning. There was some, when he bumps into some guys in the market, and he goes, "Oh, I'm just here to, to serve, like we all are," and they sort of say, "Oh, well, I think you've got a lot of making up to do," and then he just kind of he just sort of brushes them off and walks away, and you're like, "What's that about?" And then as the picture kind of gradually gets built up, I honestly think that it's a really like you said, that juxtaposition between what was happening, when they're kind of patrolling the jungles and rice fields, and then then he's back in the Netherlands, and you're sort of thinking it jars a bit, but it's like you couldn't have told the story without doing that.
Yeah, and you can see he's not exactly ostracized, but he kind of ostracizes himself. You get the impression, he's standoffish with his co-workers, and then there's that horrible incident with the horse.
Yeah, not one that struck me as as much as the prison scenes. When he goes to visit his dad. He. I think there was a lot of horrible. To be honest with you, a more kind of stark stomach churning scene for me was seeing the early on when they shoot a monkey. They sort of arrive there, and the old sweats are like, they shot a monkey and then ate it, sort of thing. But it's like, well, you didn't realize it was a monkey. It was like, when they sort of first heard the gunshot.
I thought it was a dead kid.
I was like, oh fuck, this is really. I was like, this film's gone dark very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah, well, I was like, bloody hell, like what have they just done? And then it was like, oh, and they were all sort of like trying to it was almost like they were sort of, oh, you should try it, trying to freak out the young lads, kind of thing. And it's like, well, they weren't, they had nothing on that character, the Turk, in terms of freaking out the new guys. I mean, it was amateur night.
But there was that other scene as well early on when they do visit that village and try to do the old winning the hearts and minds kind of thing, and then a couple of days later this kid turns up going, you need to come back to the village.
And then he gave him some crackers.
Yeah. But when he goes back and finds sort of the people they talk to with their heads on a stake with a dick shoved in their mouths. Yeah.
Yeah, but that again, that's like whatchamacallit, Apocalypse Now, with Marlon Brando's character, who's sort of saying, "Oh, you can't win because we did inoculations or something for smallpox or something like that, and then went back a week later and they chopped off everyone's arms who'd had the shot, and it was like Jesus, it was really severe stuff that was throwing. He's there thinking he's doing good. And they're sort of all being told in some very large letters that they're not wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they're not welcome, kind of thing. And and it's that whole thing of like you can't. He's wondering what it is they're trying to win, while being shown that actually it's going to be very, very difficult to win this.
Absolutely.
And and then joining up with someone who is basically sort of proof positive that winning's a bit of an outmoded concept out there.
Well, even he admits that, the Turk admits so when he's given the squad, isn't he? He's when he's talking to his commanding officer, he's sort of going, basically, the only way to win terror is with more terror, sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a scene which amused me when he forms his new elite squad. They all get new uniforms, and it's sort of such a dark green, it's almost black.
I thought it was actually, to be fair. And I was thinking, that's not, that stands out quite a lot.
Well, that's the thing. It was so funny because they're all looking at it going, wow, look at these cool uniforms. And it's like, all I could think of was that Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're the Nazis and they're going, hang on, are we the bad guys? Because we're wearing skulls and things on our uniforms. That's what it sort of reminded me of. But but they're also looking at it going, "Wow, we look cool, man!" We're the cool guys, sort of wearing the dark uniforms. Because you're the Death Squad, basically.
Essentially, not someone you want to be.
No, but this is. I think we've sort of basically got around to the fact that this is a really, really good film. We lots to talk about it, as you can tell. Directed by a guy called Jim Tai Hutu. This is his first sort of major film. I think he's done a couple of sort of indie features in the past, but this is definitely a step up in terms of production. He also co-wrote the script, so obviously had a lot invested in this story. Stars a guy called Martin Lake Meyer, as Johannes, and Manwan Kenzari plays the Turk. Both of them I thought were superb. I mean, some of the other characters as well, just really nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, what was his mate with the kind of pudding bowl Blackadder series?
Oh yeah. I can't remember his name, but yeah, I know which one you mean. Yeah.
I kind of expected more from him, to be honest with you, as the kind of sympathetic perspective, as a balance to what was happening to our guy.
Well, there's a scene, isn't there, where he's told to, inverted commas, drop off a prisoner.
Yeah.
And that guy goes with him, and you kind of expect him to sort of go, "What the fuck did you just do?" But he doesn't. He just sort of goes,
"Yeah, this is weird. This is what I'm saying." It's like you're kind of thinking, because he was, to me, I thought he was going to be like the control.
Yeah, the conscience sort of thing.
And he was just sort of, you're thinking they're both fairly kind of young, wide-eyed and innocent at the start. Johannes has got his demons, obviously, but they both join up, and then things are kind of plugging away slowly. But you kind of still, I was expecting, like I say, I was expecting more from him. But that whole scene where he, where he just does that, it's like, well, all right, come on then. Have you not got anything to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Cold-blooded murder committed in a no. Oh, okay.
Nothing to mention. Okay. No. Okay. How are we going to score this, Will?
A really good film. Yeah, I'd say. I mean, it deserves at least an 8. Possibly more, because it was. I mean, it's a historical war.
Yeah.
It comes in a lot of detail about what's going on. The acting is brilliant. The script is understated, but still tells you everything you need to know. The characters are great. The locations are beautiful. It's just a good film. Like you say, it would have done well in the cinema. At least an 8, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd go for an 8 as well. I mean, as a sort of trigger warning, I would have to say that the whole sequence to do with the village towards the end, the terror on the sort of the villagers' faces and stuff is it's distressing. It is a distressing sort of sequence of events. But there you go.
But it's a war film.
It is. I know, yeah, but there's war films and then there's war films. There's so when you start sort of drifting into the sort of the genocide sort of stuff, it doesn't tend to be a lot of fun, unfortunately.
No.
Anyway, we still think this is a good film. It gets 2 8s from us. It's called The East. It's going straight to streaming, we believe. So go check it out. Our next review is The Inheritance. A woman's inheritance leads her to Kyiv to uncover a dark and disturbing family secret. This kind of felt really familiar, Steve, because not so long ago we covered a film with
Asia
Argento, which had a similar. That was set in Italy, wasn't it? I think. A sort of rural Italy, and a similar sort of thing in that there's a house that they inherit. So yeah, a bit of deja vu right from the off, but this film is just weird, isn't it? Basically, this is this is a head scratcher. This one for sure.
To me, it seemed like they'd kind of ran out of money, and there was bits of the script that they just didn't film. They get there, nice couple, and then he just vanishes for like 4 days.
I know, that's fucking crazy.
But there's no
rhyme or reason to it. No reason why. The bit that sort of took me out of the film a bit. Very first night, the woman is lying in bed with her husband. She wakes up, or she hasn't gone to sleep, and hears weird noises upstairs and all this sort of stuff going on. And she decides to get up and go and investigate all on her own. And right there, I'm thinking, if that was my wife, there is no way. There is no way on earth she's going to let me sleep through that shit. And I would have slept through that shit. I said as much to Will when we reviewed a film called The Night a while back. So ghosts making loud noises. Come on, you're gonna have to try harder than that if you want. If you want me to take notice, I'm a heavy sleeper. But if my wife was next to me, she'd be kicking me, going, "Mate, wake up! There's somebody upstairs or something. Go and investigate."
Yeah.
Not like I'm gonna get out of bed on my own and go check out what the weird noises are upstairs. That's just not going to happen at all to anyone.
Not.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I say, it starts off and it's quite intriguing, and I think it's actually quite well shot and stuff. But then it just dies on its arse. It just goes flat, and nothing really happens. I mean, she finds again, like I can't remember the name of the Asia Argento, but it's the same thing. I'll look through the house. I'll find a secret room.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it's more or less the same. It's just, I don't know. It's like they've got their script, thrown half of it away, not filmed half of it, and just left gaping holes all the way through it. I kind of did like the twist. I thought that was I didn't really see that coming until she's, it just comes out where she goes to see the old servant or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it just that does kind of come out of nowhere. I thought that's quite an intriguing twist. But nothing's really done with it.
Not really. It's
and then
bizarre.
Yeah, and then the husband shows back up.
The one thing I did kind of like is basically they meet a lawyer, a sort of Russian lawyer, who's there to sort of help them through the paperwork for the house. Yeah. And they're trying to get her to sell, basically. My husband's sort of also trying to get him to sell. But this lawyer, we know right from the off that he's a shady character because he's got these 3 bodyguards with him who he instructs to stay outside for the moment. Yeah, and you think, oh, for God's sake, this is not good start. But I kind of like that element of these sort of 3 guys just sort of hanging around outside, not moving, sort of weird, sort of almost sort of guarding the property. I thought that was actually quite well done. Yeah,
but again, it doesn't bring anything to it.
No, it's right. It's just a visual thing. They have no until the end, towards the end, anyway.
And again, that's still not explained.
No.
What it is, it's frustrating.
It's like the film wants you to believe that there's this huge conspiracy surrounding the house and everyone's in on it. Even the woman at the records department who, and all this sort of stuff. Like, how is this possible on any level? It's
every single Ukrainian person in it is shady as fuck, basically. And it's just like, no, they're not. They're just, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't explain anything. And I think it could, if they'd have just sorted out the script and give it a bit of another run through and made it right or made it make sense, and I think it could have been half a decent film.
Yeah, and I think this is part of it, and I kind of say this a lot, but the director is also, or the directors in this case, are also the writers.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes, when you sort of directing your own script, I think you can be a bit overly precious with it.
Yeah,
and whereas if possibly given it to somebody else just for one final reread, and so they can sort of point out where the gaps are in the storytelling. But anyway, so as is tradition, Rich at this point would turn around to us and say, "Did you hang around for the mid-credits scene?"
I was just about to say that. To be fair.
Because it made zero sense compared to what, considering what we'd just seen at the end of the film.
Yeah,
it made, there's 2 things with it at the end of the film, which makes zero sense. whatsoever. But that mid-credit scene in particular, I'm thinking, what is that? Where did that idea come from? Because it's not mentioned in the film. There's nothing like that in the film at all. It's just a thing. And this is trying to say, well, you solved one mystery. Now let me tell you about the next mystery to do with this house. But no, the other stupid thing, which is just totally unexplained, is when she finally leaves and is supposed to be driven to the airport, and the car drives off, and then it turns out she didn't get in the car and goes back in the house.
Yeah.
What the fuck? There is a theory online which I'll discuss with you afterwards.
Right.
But it's just so. I mean, did you feel the same?
It's like that bit halfway through when she says, "Oh, you can sell the house. You're allowed to sell it, but you can only sell it to one buyer."
Person. Yeah.
And nothing else is mentioned about that.
No. Not at all.
Not who he is. She just like kind of shits herself and runs off, and doesn't. It's not elaborated on or anything, and that's what I mean. It's just frustrating.
It is so frustrating. Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, just to a certain degree, I think her husband was right in that you're not going to solve anything here. Just sell the damn thing and go. I think all her protestations would have probably gone away if somebody actually told her how much she was getting. It'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, how much? How many millions?
Yeah.
Right. Give me that pen.
Oh yeah, certainly. Definitely worth at least a couple of mil. That
Oh yeah, but and it was a lovely location as well.
Yeah, but again, it wasn't just that house. Apparently, there was the whole estate. So I presume there's other buildings and stuff as well, or other houses.
Yeah,
which we don't see anything of. We don't even know what they are. Again, causing the frustration. It's
it's a mess, unfortunately. And I think it's directed by a guy called Chad Barriger and Kevin Speckmeyer. This is Chad's first feature. Kevin Speckmeyer has had a bit more experience sort of behind the camera, so presumably he was sort of taking the lead and sort of showing Chad the ropes, as it were. I'd imagine, but they wrote the script as well, and probably just needed a bit of, as I said, just give it to somebody else to have a read through and see if they've got any notes for you. But anyway, Natalia Rumina played Sasha. And Nick Whitman was Peter, although we didn't see him much. I mean, just a shady little shit, basically, wasn't he? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't great, to be fair. I mean, I thought she was good, Natalia. And the
Yuri Giak was sort of Roman, the so-called lawyer.
Yeah. Have you seen his picture on IMDb?
Yeah, he looks completely different.
He looks well different.
Yeah, must have been an older picture, that one, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know.
So, I mean, it's difficult to recommend this to anyone. The Asia Argento one, I think, held it together a bit better and provided a bit more threat for the main character.
Well, to be fair, it provided a couple of scares. I just don't. Again, there's no real scares in it.
Yeah,
there's a bit of shouting from upstairs, and
that's basically it. We found a secret room. Yeah, but other than that, it's pretty tame overall. How are you going to score it, Steve?
I'll give it a 5.
I believe that's fair. Yeah, I shall join you on a 5. This is a frustrating film. Maybe wait for it to turn up on Netflix or Amazon or one of the other streaming sites where you don't have to pay to watch it. You may get something out of it. The location's good. It's well filmed. It's the cinematography, the sets are great. It's just the script. It all comes down to the script and the huge gaping holes and unanswered questions. Okay, I'm joined by Will Bentley to discuss Dementer. In this one, after fleeing a backwards cult, Katie tries to turn her life around by taking a job in a home for special needs adults, only to discover that she must face her dark past to save a Down syndrome woman called Stephanie. Well, this is directed by a guy called Chad Crawford Kinkle. And the reason I wanted to cover this is because his previous film called Jugface is superb. Up until, well, as far as I know, it's still available on Amazon Prime. It might not be now because this has been released with Dementer. Dementer and Jugface have been released as a double bill by Arrow. So it's quite possible it's now down from Amazon. But if you get the chance to watch it, I really do recommend it. It's a superb film. Unfortunately, this film is like chalk and cheese to that. This is the chalk, unfortunately. The style of this, it tries to go for like a sort of fly on the wall documentary style mixed with this sort of audio visual assault on your senses, which is great for the opening prologue, but it keeps going to the same well without giving you any further context of what's going on, and it just grinds on you, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, especially that soundtrack. I want to start with that and kind of get it out of the way. It is a brilliant concept, but I mean, like you say, it's an assault on the senses, and it is just there every so often. You know, you don't kind of want to. Obviously, this is someone's vision. That soundtrack, and like I know that sound design is like it's an art and stuff, and even coming up with something as jarring and discordant as that actually takes a huge amount of skill. But they need to give it a rest, to be honest with you, because like just my own personal opinion, they overuse it to the point where it becomes, you know, something that jarring shouldn't become you shouldn't become sated by it. You shouldn't become inured to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I felt by halfway through the film, it was like, you know, and it's like, even when stuff that isn't that bad is happening, it's like, here comes that music.
Here we go again.
And it's like, and you're literally thinking, but she's not doing anything. She's literally just like having a conversation with someone, or you know, and it's sort of like, I don't know, it just seemed weird. It's like it just seemed overly done. And the flashbacks were actually, I thought they were actually really skillful in terms of, she'd be looking at a scene and the flashback to
the editing was superb. Yeah, the way it flicks between the two. Yeah, because they had the dimensions of what she was in and what she was looking at almost matched. Yeah,
you know, and it was a completely different, you know, she was like flashing back to something completely different, but the overlay and the editing was that was pretty keen, actually. I was quite impressed.
Yeah, I mean, the opening sequence, it dives straight into this sort of hallucinatory scenario where I assume this is when she's escaping from this cult. You know, she's sort of naked, running through this sort of long grass, possibly being chased by somebody covered in blood. But we never ever get any context as to what's going on. But the trouble is, and this is both, you know, it could be the reality in that, you know, there's zero exposition in this film. You know, we only know what's going on, you know, the fact that she's left a cult or whatever, because we're told by the press release. You know, the synopsis for the film is that this is what's happening. There's nothing in the film which actually tells us this. At no point does Katie have any conversation with her colleagues or anyone else to give any context of what's actually happening. You know, she's got a few notebooks and things which she's sort of reading, but as we learn in the film, you know, her own sort of recollections can't be relied on either, and even the things that she may or may not have written down.
She's a heavily traumatized young woman, isn't she? I mean,
exactly.
She's
and assume, you know, she wants to hide as much as possible from her new employers, obviously. So she's not going to confide in her co-worker saying, "Oh yeah, I was in a cult." It's like red flag.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to happen.
You don't tend to lead with that, do you?
No. So so she's hiding a lot, but unfortunately, she's also hiding it from the viewer. And the flashbacks don't give us any real context at all. Even later on, when we do get to see a little bit more, and when Larry Fessenden finally turns up, there's nothing there. There's really nothing there. Unfortunately,
all that would do, to be fair, all that would do is like if you went in and watched this completely cold and you didn't have the press releases.
Yeah, we just sort of put the film on. There you go. Just start watching this. What do you think?
Then you would only kind of it would take you probably 2/3 of the way in before you thought, okay, so she, this is what happened. She was in a cult. She's not really left it in her mind. That's kind of how she's still seeing the world. Because that's essentially what the story is, but it's just it takes a very strangulatedly long time to sort of spit it out.
Absolutely. Now the film is quite brave in that most of the characters in the film are actually sort of mentally handicapped people. In fact, the woman playing Stephanie, who's sort of, the sort of main focus of sort of Katie's concern, is actually the director's sister, also called Stephanie, and who actually does have Down syndrome. So kudos on that front. And I thought she was really good and a really sort of quite a sympathetic character, sort of all the way through it. And it is kind of you do feel fearful for her as the film goes on, and I won't sort of spoil what happens or anything.
No, you don't. I mean, and it's actually, it's hard, isn't it? Because you're like, well, what is it that you're afraid is going to happen? Where is the threat actually coming from? Is it, the threat that our heroine is portraying, or is it, is it something else? And and it's kind of that in that sense, it is multi-layered, isn't it? Like you say, you don't really want to kind of go into too much detail, but it's, and I suppose it plays on. I mean, that's quite a sort of, to one sense, it's a niche market. Not everybody has, immediate kind of family who are, who basically, have sort of quite serious disabilities and, are going to sort of have to be cared for and have to rely on someone who you don't always get to kind of choose. I suppose most people might be thinking, well, when I'm older, I might be, in a situation where maybe I have to be looked after, sort of thing. So, but it's actually, it's not, it's a vulnerability that's not like an immediately shared vulnerability by everyone who's watching this film, if you see what I mean. Because it's sort of, it's like, well, but it's an obvious vulnerability. This is a disabled woman who has to count on the people around her to care for her because she's not able to do it herself. And something really quite weird is happening to that person, because Stephanie's what's her name, not Stephanie, Katie's character is the kind of the one-to-one carer for Stephanie.
That's right.
Key worker kind of thing. And it is quite a, in her not sort of flashback jarring, saw and violin music in the background moments, she's brilliant. She's great, and it automatically immediately like very, very good. And in fact, all as stuff gets weirder, it's all motivated by her feeling concerned for Stephanie.
Absolutely.
Well. It's actually, I mean, there is actually a lot to there's a lot in there. I just think it's hidden by quite a bit of.
I agree.
I don't want to be, I think it's a lot of there's stuff hidden behind stuff that was unnecessary in this film.
Yeah, I think it could have benefited from, a bit more of a sort of straightforward narrative, less, the flashbacks are too obtuse.
There's too many. There's
too many of them. Yeah. yeah, less would have been more. I think
because the interplay. What's the other lady called? The kind of the other carer, the long time.
Yeah.
That Katie's learning from. The interplay, the dialogue there, it was really natural, wasn't it? I mean, it was brilliantly.
Yeah, Brandy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's Brandy.
That dialogue was excellent because it just seemed when you said it was a bit almost like a fly on the wall sort of documentary. Those moments were, they were completely. They felt brilliant and authentic, and they were actually really well performed because you can't just ad lib stuff like that. That was just really good acting of very down to earth people in a very down to earth setting, and it was just really well played. And you think there was a lot to work with there, but they overdid some stuff, and it's a shame.
It is because the casual viewer is not going to get much from this at all. Unfortunately, I think people who've liked who've liked sort of Chad's previous film might be disappointed and frustrated by this. Larry Fessenden. I don't know if you've come across Larry Fessenden before. He's
I must have done watching films for you guys.
Possibly. He's one of these sort of auteurs / raconteur kind of characters in sort of independent horror movies. He looks somewhere between Andy Serkis and Jack Nicholson. He's quite unmistakable sort of character, and we only see flashes of him in this. He plays the sort of the cult leader Larry, who we hear throughout the film, but we only see him very briefly towards the end. But if you ever see Larry Fessenden's name attached to anything, either as a director, producer, writer, director, it's likely that it's going to be worth checking out. Because he does have a good ear for projects, basically a good eye for projects. As I said, Chad Crawford Kinkle, his previous film, The Pit, also starred Fessenden, funny enough, and it was set in this sort of backwoods community that was lorded over by this creature that lived in a pit, and it granted them like perfect health as long as every now and again they gave him a sacrifice. And the way he chooses the sacrifices, there was a local potter, and he would put him in a trance, and he'd make a jug with the person's face that was going to be sacrificed. Right. And it's all about this young teenage girl who finds out she's due to be the next sacrifice, so she hides the jug. And it causes like huge problems and tragedies and everything like that. It's a brilliant film. It really is. So I was really excited to see this, and this is a completely different film style and narrative. Obviously, it's quite personal. As I said, his sister is Down syndrome, so it felt like a very personal project. But I think sometimes perhaps sort of directors and especially since he wrote it as well, I think sometimes sort of writer directors need to take a step back from some of their projects. I think they can be a bit too precious about them, and possibly need someone to sort of step in and go, you need to change this. I can see the vision you've got here, but is anyone going to share it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's too personal a depiction, isn't it? I mean, I mean, who are we to say at the end of the day? Someone's making a work of art, but it's also a film, and films have a language that you're trying to communicate something to the audience, and if you're not, if it's not being communicated in a way that everything that you're trying to say is kind of accessible.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think that, need a bit of help. I think he had like an audience of one in mind for this whole film. That's kind of how it comes across. I mean, I love the ending. I do. I love that sort of enigmatic ending where sort of things, nothing's explained again. But it's but at the same time,
I know what I inferred from it.
Oh yeah, same here. Yeah, we'll talk about it afterwards as well.
yeah. But we're not no spoilers, no spoilers. But yeah, no, it's actually it's sort of just I did a bit of reading on it sort of while I was watching it, and there was something I read. I think it was actually, I don't know if it was part of it might have actually been part of the screening notes, but it's saying that the director Kinkle wanted to sort of not just have Stephanie in his world, but to sort of have the film in her world. Her world was obviously, I don't necessarily know whether she lives in a place exactly like that, or if that is indeed where she's living, because she obviously needs a high level of care. I kind of don't know, but her world is obviously a lot of care, a lot of supervision, and that kind of that came over, because it's not, it's this is a film that if it was made not even that long ago, would have been very much like, well, that's the alien other, that this world of people who are different, and that in itself would have been something to to make the audience feel uncomfortable, when in fact it was very much, well, this is actually their world. These are a community. These are people. They have differences. They have disabilities. They have things that make their day-to-day life different from perhaps the majority of people who are watching it. But in and of itself, that was their home, and I think he sort of he did that, and he did that quite well, because we've all watched, certainly for you, we've all watched films where the asylum, the psychiatric hospital, the place where people are different is in and of itself a scary backdrop, and it's like, well, this was their home.
Well, that's
this was their life.
The other thing the film highlights as well is the kind of level of care being offered by the state. Katie's able to get this job with the minimum of sort of background checks.
Exactly. Well, none, I'd say, because I'd say that she was a terrible candidate for the job, considering where did she come from? Who the hell was she? No one knew that she basically was. You'd say she was a high-risk individual. I think
so.
She's someone who needed care herself, quite frankly.
Yeah, living in a car and all this sort of stuff. It's but I mean, Bristol, for example, had a huge scandal about 5 years ago with one of its care homes having to be closed down, basically because sort of the care being presided was criminal, basically. So so I mean, the fact that these people, the people doing the job are obviously sort of, they do care and they're hardworking, but at the same time, from the management point of view, I think there is this sort of level of desperation. It's like, we need people, we can't be fussy. This is a hard job, sort of looking after these people. We just cannot be fussy about who we get in, and just cross our fingers. Yeah, and just cross our fingers that they're not going to steal the meds and or assault the patients,
or assault the people, clients. That's it. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's like on the edge constantly of it all going wrong.
Yeah. I was kind of reminded of a better film than this. There's a film called Pyewacket, which I really love, which had a similar sort of filming style, in that the camera is always in and around the people, but never sort of never exactly sort of subjecting anyone to being the subject, kind of thing, if you see what I mean. It was just almost as if you were just there hanging out with a bunch of people without sort of drawing attention to yourself. And what that film was about was this girl who summons a demon called Pyewacket to kill her mum because they'd had some disagreement. And then she sort of like, the morning after realizes, oh my God, what the fuck have I done, sort of thing, and tries to sort of, hope. And it's one of these films which it rides that fine line of like, is it real? Is it not real? Is it all in their head? Or is there something else going on? And I think this is the kind of thing that this film was aiming for, in that you don't, she is having hallucinations and flashbacks and things. So when you do sort of see stuff in the home, you're still not sure whether it's actually real or not until she actually sort of interacts with it, and you're going, okay, so that's real. How did it get there, sort of thing.
Yeah. I need to see that. I think a good analogy for this one. Actually,
yeah, I'll have to sort of find out how you can see that. It's really good. Okay, so I sort of sent you a link for another film called The Organ Grinder, which is a short film that the director Kinkle made a few years back, which also stars Katie Groshon as this woman who is kind of like a reverse succubus, basically, taking on demons on her back, shall we say.
It's a concept I've just never come across this before.
It's
odd, isn't it? It's like she's an exorcist of sorts.
Yeah, she's basically fucking demons out of their hosts until they sort of manifest, and then she sort of kills them, which is it's an interesting concept. I don't know how much.
It's not a porno.
No.
It's not an adult movie. Let's just be clear on that.
Yeah.
It actually isn't. Despite, there's no way you can describe it without it coming over as the worst kind of.
I've seen worse in that regard. There are films out there like that, but whether or not this has got legs further than the sort of 15-minute short that it is, or no, 6 minutes short that it is.
I'd say no.
Without sort of just repeating itself.
No, I'd say no.
In which case, it would become the porno you just described.
Yeah,
you just warn people off. No, it's not a porno. Well, the 90-minute version is, but this one.
6 minutes is enough for me.
6 minutes is enough, yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting short, and it does show, for those who haven't seen The Pit / Jugface, that Kinkle is capable of putting together a cohesive narrative, and keep the camera still for 5 seconds. And it is, and we will put the link to this. And it's not our main short shot for this week, but we will put a link in the footnotes so you can check it out. By all means, go out and get the Arrow release of Blu-ray of The Pit / Dementer. The Pit is an essential film, I feel. This is it's a curiosity piece at best, I think. But I mean, on that note, Will, how are you going to score Dementer?
God, that's a tough one, Mike. It really is, because in a lot of technical ways, I think it scores quite highly.
Yeah, I mean, we can't, this is the sort of situation we had the other week with Sacrilege. We had to sort of begrudgingly agree that from a production point of view and behind the camera, there's a lot of technical skill involved. But as a film, as a piece of entertainment, do you think this actually works?
I'm afraid not for me. I mean, I really just I didn't have the patience, and part of me's sort of going, well, hang on, am I being mean because actually it's just a narrative that just didn't resonate with me, and it's actually a narrative I just didn't feel I couldn't sustain the patience for it. And that's a shame, because there was a lot to recommend for an indie flick, for a folk horror, for a folk horror. There was some good stuff, but no, I don't know, just not for me. Way too slow, way too jarring, and with the jarringness overdone. I think it could have told that story in a lot less time and a lot more clearly without losing any of the impact. So for me, I can't give it more than a 6 on this one, and that, for me, that's cruel.
Yeah, well, I'm going to join you on a 6. I believe. I think that it could have been less obtuse. It could have a bit better structure. Cut out half of the the jarring noises. It would have been a much better film. There are better films that deal with the idea of cults, returning to cults, or escaping from cults. Films like The Endless, which is really good. And there's another one that I was just thinking of, Welcome to the Circle, which hasn't actually had a proper release over here yet. I'm hoping it does at some point. Those are much better examples, sort of dealing with the idea of cults. This one, you don't even really sort of get an idea of what the cult was. You know, what sort of cult was it that he was doing? You know, was there an occult element, or you know, was it just some Manson type? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of
just one guy.
I know there was more because you know there were a couple of scenes of her sort of getting slapped around in a room and that sort of stuff, and people wearing masks. So there, you know, it was a bit more than that, but at the same time, you know, he hadn't gone in. There's nothing there to sort of try and describe what sort of belief system or anything like that. He just used the word, yeah, it was a cult or whatever. And in fact, that's never actually spoken in the film. So there you go. So anyway, 2 6s, and that's attached with a warning from both of us. Casual viewers beware. But that is Dementer, on release as a part of a double bill with The Pit / Jugface. Our next review is The Last Exorcist. Orphan siblings Joe and Maddie had a tumultuous upbringing, but survived thanks to the help of priest Father Peter. When he is suddenly killed, it triggers something inside the sisters and opens a door to evil. You can probably tell I'm not taking this seriously. How can I, when a priest is destroyed at the beginning by a bomb vest wearing terrorist demon character? It is, what's the word I'm looking for? Ridiculous?
Yeah,
ridiculous.
Awful. Dreadful. Not even Danny Trejo is awful in this film.
He turns up very suddenly in this film, and it's almost like he's just wandered on set looking for soup.
Yeah.
You know, but let's sort of rewind a bit. The film starts in the most ridiculous manner, with this sort of kind of exorcism being undertaken with this guy, this naked guy. Apart from he's wearing his underpants, like Y fronts, covered in blood, with the number 666 written on his chest in biro, or you know, felt tip pen or something, while a priest sort of tries to incant, you know, the exorcism. And it just how can I describe it? It looks like some sort of fetish thing, like a BDSM fetish thing that you just kind of walked in on by mistake. So, oh, sorry, I opened the wrong door there. But this is, you know, it's treated like this really serious thing, and then the sort of, you know, the priest is giving this this talk in the Vatican, with the video playing behind him. And there's a bit where he sort of freeze frames it, and he sort of says, see that shadow there? That's not CGI or anything like that. That's not Photoshop. And I'm thinking, what are you pointing at? Because you might not say, you may be saying that, yeah, it's not Photoshop or anything, but somewhere in the production, someone's going, oh shit, we forgot to Photoshop in the shadow. You know, and then this guy turns up wearing a bomb vest and blows up the Vatican. You know, this whole thing. It's the most ridiculous start to any film I've seen for a long time. The one thing I did like about that whole bit at the beginning was where he's talking about, you know, sorry, he's talking about mental illness and whether or not that, you know, is there any link between mental illness and demonic possession? You know, is demonic possession just a, you know, a not exactly a symptom, but you know, a demonstration of mental illness, or is it vice versa? You know, and I thought, okay, but maybe it's an interesting idea there, and the idea that, you know, this priest is blowing up, this Father Peter, I think his name is, and you know, that creates a psychotic break with the two girls, you know, sending them in sort of totally different directions. But I thought, okay, that's an interesting idea to explore, except it's not. That is sort of almost dropped straight away, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway,
yeah, it was just right. Across the board, terrible performances.
There's so much here. You got the two sisters. Here's the thing. You've got a sister. You've got a sister, haven't you? Lives out in Germany. Yeah. Have you ever?
That's the wife's sister. That. But,
oh, sorry. Okay, but even so, you've got a sister. Have you ever, in your life, spoken to her and just called her sister?
No.
Never. Of course not.
Why? Why
would you? It's just the most bizarre thing. It's purely there for plot exposition. It's like, we need to hammer home the fact that these two are sisters. Even though it's abundantly clear by this point that they're related. It is absolutely, because they're reminiscing about when they were in the orphanage and all this sort of stuff, and the fact that they sort of made a point of saying, didn't want to be separated from their mother, and or the things that their mother did. And but then they start talking to each other, going, "Hey, sister." Well, sister. And I thought, me, it is the most ridiculous thing. It's like in in action films and stuff, where people try to insult somebody by calling them by their profession. It's like, you can't talk to me like that, mechanic. Or something like that. It's that sort of, I need to impart some exposition in my ridiculous dialogue. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a whole thing with the orderly in the mental hospital, which sort of like it veers from ripping off Terminator 2 to going into Kill Bill territory.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, my name is Buck and I like to,
But this is the thing that kind of threw me as well. That's the guy from the beginning.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I'm like, he's just shown up out of nowhere, acting weird as fuck with her, and sends her into this, I don't know, sex dream thing.
Yeah. It's freaky.
Then she runs off. Then he rapes the sister.
See, and then doesn't come into it at all after that until
right
it's
at the end.
Yeah, it's an implication at the end when.
No, but in either one when she goes all kung fu priest, it's him, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Kung fu priest. I'll kick ass for the Lord. What film's that?
Yeah.
Time Out.
I can't fucking remember now.
It's bloody hell. Peter Jackson film. What was it called? Brain Dead?
Hang on. Brain Dead. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one.
Right. But so you've got two half sisters.
Yes, but they have different dads, don't they? Basically,
yeah.
What it boils down to.
Who basically see the mum.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. That was a good concept as well. The fact that that their upbringing was so diverse, in that her mum, hates the older sister because obviously the guy who knocked her up was a bit of a wrong un, and dotes on the younger sister, and so there's this sort of really horrific sort of like dynamic in their home life before things escalate, as we find out. So, and again, interesting ideas there, just badly handled and sort of swamped by all the rest of the crap that goes on.
Yeah, very, very badly handled. I mean, to be fair, the older sister is absolutely terrible. It's probably the worst performance I've seen in a long while, since Witches of Amityville, to be fair. It really is that bad.
Yeah.
She's even when she's like supposedly possessed at the end, and
the whole of the possession thing, unfortunately, just didn't work.
No,
the voice that she's using, I wish they'd done more to disguise her voice.
Yes,
to make it more sort of demonic or something.
Screech. She's just like screechy, and it doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's the worst exorcism scene I've ever seen.
Can we change the name of the film to The Worst Exorcist?
Yeah. I mean,
see, this is one of the other things the film gets horrifically wrong as well, because they're sort of saying, at the beginning they're sort of saying, "Oh, this is one of the last exorcists sort of left alive" or something, and there's thousands of them. The Catholic Church is thousands of exorcists all over the country, all over the world. So and that's like from the tiniest bit of research on the wiki, it would have told you that. But
again, this I think is their church in Pittsburgh or something, but their mate priest, whoever brought him up, is blown up in the Vatican.
Yes.
So it's all right. Maybe he's gone over there to do this video or give this talk or whatever and stuff. But also as well, when it goes back, and a lot of it is flashbacks. To be fair, with the mum and everything like that. But then he's bringing her.
Oh yeah.
To exorcisms. Yeah. So it's like he needs to train her up because he's seen what's coming and.
Well, he obviously didn't see too much what was coming, did he? Because he
said. Oh yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot here which sort of made up on the fly.
Yes, like all of it. Because, you're right though. I mean, there is good ideas. I mean, I was actually listening to a podcast today about The Exorcist, and I forgot the bit where Caris is saying, exorcisms and possession has dropped so much because now it's more mental health than anything. It's stuff like that. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and it does head in that direction. She gets more or less sectioned by the police for a little bit, and then
and there are those sort of parallels between the idea of possession. Is it possession? Is it some sort of mental, psychotic break kind of scenario? Sort of interesting, but as you say, it doesn't. It wants its cake and eat it too. So it wants to sort of throw those sort of bits in, but also have, sort of grotesque silliness going on at the same time. And the ideas clash, unfortunately.
Big style. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
It's like they've just ran at each other.
I think we've kicked this one enough. we're not going to bully it, but this is. I think it's worthy of a look.
Yeah,
I do. I do. I think there are some interesting ideas here worth looking at. And overall, the film's in the right frame of mind. It's probably worth a giggle or two. With the right amount of beer. Yeah, with the right amount of beer, you can have fun with this one, because it is just so po-faced as well. It's not self-aware in any way.
No,
but it is amusing anyway. So, Steve, how are you going to score this? How are you going to score it?
I'm giving it a 3.
A 3. All right.
Yeah.
So we gave The Inheritance double 5, and I can't. It's not as good as that, but it's probably more entertaining in its own way. So I'm going to give it a 5. So for different reasons to Inheritance. So a 3 and a 5 for The Last Exorcist, and it's definitely not The Last Exorcist at all. But there you go.
No.
So go check it out. Our short shot this week is Deadlock. When concrete proof arises that ghosts actually exist, a new police task force is set up to capture them. This film follows one Deadlock officer on a typical day on the job. Or is it? This is really, really good. It definitely, there are definite nods to Ghostbusters, obviously, especially around the way they sort of trap the ghost. But other than that, this is just a really, really good story. So, Steve, over to you.
Obvious, like you're saying, links to Ghostbusters, and also going into the Sixth Sense as well.
I think even their sort of patch, their sort of design has a nod towards Ghostbusters.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But no, it was good. I was a bit. I didn't take to the guy at first, and I don't know why. I just didn't think his performance was great at the beginning. But as he went through, I thought he improved immensely, and the ending, I thought he was pretty phenomenal at the ending, to be fair. The scene with the daughter as well was a bit, it just seemed a bit confusing, as if he'd forget a child's birthday.
I know.
That bit threw me a little bit, but apart from that, I thought it was really well done, really well filmed, really well shot, and the timing thing, sometimes with stuff like that, it can get a bit boring, it's repeating the same stuff over and over again, but this one, it didn't. I liked how it changed each time.
Yeah.
But in quite a way, it wasn't just a little change, it was quite a big difference in it each time. And that ending, I thought was a really good twist, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think the cinematography in this is brilliant. Especially the interiors, really, really cool. Rich, you dug this one out as you usually do. What do you make of it?
Yeah, this was really good. This came up on the Short of the Week YouTube feed that I follow, and just as an aside, one of the things I don't like about some of the listings that you get of short films online is that they describe the theme rather than actually telling you what the title is, or the title is buried. Like at the end, it's it's like a description of keywords that they try.
Yeah, because I almost overlooked this. When you sort of gave us the name, and I looked for it, because I think it says something like ghosts are treated like criminals or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm
not a fan of that. No. They do it. Omeletto do it. It's just not a. I'd rather the title was there, clearer. But that's a complete aside. So I saw it from that, checked it out. It was impressed, by the quality, the high production values that it's got. As you say, the cinematography and the lighting and everything is all really good in the editing. Ghostbusters obviously, but what it made me think of was like, imagine it's like Ghostbusters crossed with Code 8, which was the short proof of concept film, which then got turned into a feature.
Steve Amell and Robbie Amell.
This I think is also a proof of concept, so it'd be interesting to see if they did manage to go the full hog. It's kind of like one of those gritty reboot kind of fan films, like the Adi Shankar bootleg universe, like Power Rangers and stuff. So you could imagine this being if you left it as Ghostbusters as a fan film. I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with Tai Singh about, why would somebody make a fan film versus an original kind of product? Well, this is kind of somewhere between the two, is like they've clearly done something that's harkening back or nodding to Ghostbusters while trying to do their own thing at the same time. But you could easily imagine it. Now, coincidentally, this week also, a couple of days ago, a new Ghostbusters fan film did drop, which I checked out, which I hope we'll get to discuss in a future episode, because that was really quite good, I thought. Cool. But this is a completely kind of much more serious take on the ideas in Ghostbusters. It is much more of a ghost story, like you're saying. There's Sixth Sense elements in there, but it's the construction of the story. It's repetition and memories and flashbacks, and is it? It's all questionable until certain things are clarified as the story unfolds. So it's quite cleverly done. It's intriguing because you're seeing events, and then you're seeing as Steve was saying, you're seeing variations on those events. So you're not 100% sure what's happening. Is it easy to guess? Quite probably. You could probably, some people probably figure it out quite quickly. Is that detrimental? Not really. I don't think.
No, not
I think in terms of the whole product and the potential for any sort of development of that, I think it's a really good world building exercise. It does also stand alone, I think, as its own thing. If it doesn't turn into anything else, which I appreciate, because I don't like it when it's all set up and no payoff, whereas this does have a payoff, although it does leave some doors open and stuff. So yeah, and the cast, I like the cast. As I think I didn't necessarily warm to the lead, but I was a bit I wasn't as connected to the characters the first time around. I think the second time I could sort of connect, see people and sort of connect with them a bit more, because it's quite a dark film. They're all wearing the same uniforms and stuff. So first time around, I didn't realize necessarily I was following the character that I saw a little bit later. One other little aside is it's one of the supporting characters, who I think is one of the main ones in the last scene, is Lawrence Fishburne's son, Langston Fishburne. So, which I thought was quite interesting. So I saw his name in the credits and looked him up. So yeah, I thought this was really good.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you guys. I thought this was very solid. Definite nods to Ghostbusters. In fact, I don't know how familiar you are with the original concept of Ghostbusters, but it almost sort of plays to the original idea that they were sort of like, the idea of like ghosts are so commonplace that the job is kind of like being like the local garbage man's kind of thing.
Yeah, that was the original kind of concept, I think. Yeah.
And this sort of, even though, okay, they've sort of dressed up as a police force, but you can clearly see that these ghosts really don't have any, aren't any threat to anyone, really. It's not like Ghostbusters where you got like Slimer and stuff or anything like that. These are just sort of like, people trapped in a moment, as it were. So that was interesting, and you could see the resentment towards the whole concept of sort of incarcerating ghosts when they haven't done anything apart from possibly haunting a few people. That's there's
a lot of political subtext going on.
A lot of good stuff there. Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't overplay it. It's there. But I think it just sort of does. It keeps on the right side of the fence with it, I think. So, anything else to add, guys, on this one?
No, I just want to quickly mention that Ghostbusters film that I mentioned briefly. It's called Ghostbusters South Side, and that does follow that very idea of franchising, basically, and down the road, think it's kind of in that well-worn sort of like used universe kind of thing. It's like it's all been going on for quite some time now, kind of thing, and that's where that kind of story picks up. But that's a very sort of traditional kind of Ghostbusters take, and it ends with not more of a cliffhanger than any kind of resolution. Whereas, as I say, what I appreciated about this was it's a completely different kind of take on trying to do a Ghostbusters style story. And it's a self-contained thing in its own right. So it's a good. I think it's 21 minutes.
I think so.
Well worth your time. I mean, it's as long as an episode of like an anthology program, like I don't know, like
Tales from the Crypt or something.
Yeah, something like or Outer Limits or whatever they used to be. Although Outer Limits, I think, was like
that was an hour.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, an hour.
Twilight Zone, stuff like that. You used to have those half-an-hour shows, didn't you, and stuff. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So we don't score the shorts, but we certainly recommend that you check them out. You will find a link to this in the footnotes below. Please do. Our DTV throwback this week is Open Graves. Jason is an American grad student killing the summer surfing in Spain. When he comes into possession of an antique board game, he ropes his friends into playing, unwittingly sealing each of their fates one by one. So this came out in 2009. Stars Mike Vogel and Eliza Dushku. And I can only imagine that Dushku's agent probably went, Eliza, do you want to spend the summer in Spain and do fuck all? And she went, yeah, sounds good to me. Because she is called on to do absolutely nothing and is literally there. You know, she's in almost every other scene.
Yeah.
But that's it. You know, she does absolutely nothing. I like this film. It is completely ridiculous. It really is. And it is one of those sort of, it's not made by Platinum Dunes, I don't think, but it is that sort of horror film. You know, you got the cast, you know, sort of well cut cast and everything. You got a bit more gore and sort of nastiness than usual.
Yeah, I was quite surprised with the gore actually. It is a bit over the top, but the thing that lets it down, I think the main thing that lets it down is the god awful CG in it.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, the snakes.
The crabs.
Oh, the crabs. You know. I like the crabs. This is what is also quite amusing about this is that each death, you know, it's almost as if, well, for example, the first guy gets killed. He stops for a whiz by the side of the road on top of a cliff. Oh dear! A dragonfly of all things startles him. He falls off the cliff. Manages to grab on to. Well, he falls off the cliff, and then it cuts back to the other kids at the you know, where in the house playing the board game. And you think, oh, okay. But then it goes back to him and it turns out, no, he isn't dead yet. He's managed to hold on to some barbed wire, which is cutting into his hands and he's hanging off the cliff. And you think, okay. But then he falls off the cliff and then you see his body at the bottom and he's all mangled and stuff. And you think, oh, that's the poor guy. And it cuts back to the board game guys for a bit. And then it goes back to him. And it's like, suddenly he's attacked by crabs. These crabs sort of crawling all over him. It's like a scene out of there's a Lucio Fulci movie called The Beyond, which is a similar sort of thing where this guy falls off a ladder and he's attacked by spiders and they're sort of eating his face and all this sort of stuff. And it's very similar to that. It's obviously, you know, in fact, it's so similar. It probably was a bit of a nod to Fulci in that regard. And that's sort of kind of the way the film goes. It's like, yeah, that death was quite kind of nasty, but let's just push it a bit more, see what else we can do with it, sort of thing, you know. There's a good fake out as well with one of the guys. He goes to like a lumberyard, and he's trying to reach this photo between two things which are obviously going to mangle his arm up pretty nastily, you know. And you think, oh, and you kind of waiting for it to happen. It doesn't quite happen, and then he dies another way. So yeah, definitely kudos for you know, pushing the boat out with the death scenes, that's for sure. You know,
well, it's Jumanji crossed with Final Destination. Really,
that's exactly what it is. That is exactly it. It's Jumanji versus, you know, crossed with the Final Destination because it is a case of, you know, this board game. When you sort of out, you know, you have to pick a card and it tells you how your character dies or something like that, and then that basically comes true. Yeah. So yeah, that was all really well done. And you're sort of trying to guess how it's going to happen, sort of thing.
The winner gets a wish, and that bit was kind of interesting because when, you know, the guy gives him the board game and then he's in a wheelchair with no legs, and then when they catch up with him,
suddenly he's walking by and he's got
and I'm like, what? Eh? But then they showed it, and even that bit was quite, you know, his legs growing back was like quite nasty and gruesome as well. There's a lot of gore in this from which I didn't expect, especially like, is it his brother who's skinned alive or something?
Yeah.
And you see the body hanging. Oh, I mean, that bit, well, that was a bit much for me, that, but
yeah, no, it's really good in that respect.
It's fun, it's frothy, it's, you know, it's not too taxing or anything. It's
it's really, they make really good use of the countryside, or the coastline in Spain where it's shot. There's this really interesting sort of walkway, this causeway that goes across the bay. So it's about just wide enough for like two people to walk across or something, and it looks like something that you might see in Game of Thrones. But it's just looked really, really cool, and the sort of cinematography and everything's really good. It's directed by a guy called Alvaro de Arminian. He is Pedro Almodovar's go-to second unit director. So he's done a lot of films for Pedro Almodovar, sort of working as second unit. So a lot of experience there. So it's an interesting sort of like sort of American / Spanish production. All the cast are, the whole film's in English, and it does have this really interesting twist as well. There's a particular character that you're sort of following through the film, and then all of a sudden they take a much more vested interest in what's going on. You kind of following their sort of narrative, and all of a sudden it's like they're sort of much more into what's actually happening, which I thought was really, really cool. They must have heard about the board game or maybe played it even at a certain point. But
do you mean? Can I just clarify? Do you mean the copper?
Yeah, basically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That threw me quite a bit at first. I'm like, okay, he's investigating it, but then he starts. Then he knows about the game. He's trying to get the game, and you're like, well, wow, why? What's
Yeah.
Is he just trying to solve the murders? And then he explains why, exposition dump, but why he's after the game. It's like, okay, that does make sense now. Because that was just a bit like, don't get that. But
I just thought it was interesting because you think it's like, in a lot of these sort of films where you have, the fantastical element. And then you have the sort of police procedural bit, which doesn't believe in the supernatural bit, So you get this sort of jarring juxtaposition between the two, and yet then there's this guy going, I not only I believe you, but I want the thing you have, which was it was quite.
No, that's what I mean.
It,
when it comes to it, it does make sense with him. Why. And I think he's actually got kind of a bit more vested interest than the kids, really, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like the ending as well. It kind of reminded me of Devil's Advocate, the Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino one.
Yeah, they kind of solved it but haven't, sort of thing.
Yeah,
So you've kind of solved it, but you've left all the pieces in place, basically. You haven't actually sort of changed anything. The only thing that which sort of threw me a little bit is, Eliza Dushku's character, who, at the end plays a bit more of an integral role, but it kind of threw me because he had already sort of met her, or his friend had met her, before he'd even got the game. So why was she interacting with them as that person when they may not have been the ones who got the game? Because that was a completely different thing. So I was trying to think, well, why?
Hang on, you throw me here.
Yeah, at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
So the main character, Jason and his mate, just been surfing, and his mate's been chatting up Eliza Dushku's character.
Yeah.
And it's not till later on, like the next day or something, when he gets hold of the game, and then Eliza Dushku's character, introduces herself to him. But she was always floating around. But maybe that's it. Maybe she was just sort of in the, because the game's there, she's there, sort of thing. And it's just a case of waiting to see who uses the game. But maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No, I think you're reading too much. No, you are, because don't forget, at the end, she's not involved.
No, she is. She's still there. That was a weird thing because she's still there. Still says,
Is she?
yeah, she's still there. She's still there when they start playing the game, which is the weird thing. But there you go.
Okay. I still think you're reading too much into it.
Possibly.
I mean, I know she's like seen as the witch and stuff, but I just think that's just taking on her form, if you know what I mean.
Possibly, yeah. Okay. Yeah, different ways to read it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say this is a fun, unassuming sort of little horror that it is. As we said, it's Jumanji meets Final Destination, but without the budget of either.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun that as we said, the sort of the kill scenes are pretty gruesome for this sort of movie. It's definitely an R rating. It's not PG-13.
No.
So yeah, it's available on Amazon Prime. So definitely worth checking out. And that is the end of this week's show. So thanks to Steve, Will, and Rich, who've joined me tonight to talk about all these wonderful films. Don't forget to check out our Twitter account at the DTV Digest, also on Facebook. Also check out our sister account, which is the DTV Digest Short Shots and its own podcast. We've just dropped a couple of episodes at the moment on that one. Other than that, thank you for listening and tune in next time.
Thank you for listening to the DTV Digest. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tune in again next time.